Breaking news, one of Donald Trump's closest White House aides is expected to testify in his hush money trial. Hope Hicks was by Trump's side as his 2016 campaign press secretary during the final weeks of the election when he was trying to keep his alleged affairs off the front pages. She testified before the grand jury in March of 2023, and a source with direct knowledge of the situation now tells NBC News she will take the stand once again. NBC's Vaughn Hilliard and MSNBC legal correspondent Lisa Rubin are with me now. Let's talk, first of all, Vaughn, if we can, about the relationship between Hope Hicks and Donald Trump. He broke with a lot of his former White House aides. What do we know about that and what information she might have?
Right. And Hope Hicks has been kind of quiet. I mean, the last time we were talking about Hope Hicks was when 1 year ago she testified in front of the grand jury specifically to this hush money payment case. And now Hope Hicks, she, per federal court records dating back to Michael Cohen when he pleaded guilty, he contended at the time that there was a phone call in which she latched not only Michael Cohen, but with Donald Trump together. And so there's questions about on October 8th, 2016, the day that Stormy Daniels came forward to the National Enquirer and said that she was ready to share her story, but could potentially all but be paid off, that there were conversations that Hope Hicks was allegedly a part of. And then we also know she was on another phone call later that month on the actual day that Michael Cohen agreed to pay that $130,000 to American media. So the question is, does Hope Hicks have testimony to provide about the extent to which Donald Trump was signing off specifically on those payments?
Key question, obviously, what does she have to say? But if the prosecution wants to use her, let's talk about her as a witness, because we've talked about Michael Cohen, somebody who's been convicted of perjury. There are other people who are in Trump's circle who could probably, I don't know if I'd say easily, but there could be pressure on their credibility as a witness, right? Hope Hicks is somebody who stood by Donald Trump for a very long time.
For a very long time, but, and this is a critical but, if you look at the transcript of Hope Hicks's transcribed interview with the January 6th committee, you see a person who, at the end of her White House service, did break somewhat with Donald Trump. She didn't leave as acrimoniously as other people did. At the same time, she didn't share his belief that the election had been stolen. And that, at the time, was headline-making news, that Hope Hicks had essentially said to him, Mr. President, you and I don't see this the same way. And he sort of deprecatingly said to others, well, Hope doesn't believe me. But she didn't leave his orbit on bad terms, at least not as bad as many others have left. So it remains to be seen what Hope Hicks will be like in a courtroom if she testifies, what her demeanor is like with Donald Trump, the defendant, sitting right in front of her.
But does that make her more credible?
I think it does make her more credible in a way. And in that respect, Chris, I would liken her to Ivanka, who, when she testified at the civil fraud trial, because she is no longer a participant in her father's political life, because she was known to have advised him in the days after January 6th to be contrite, to do things that he didn't do. Although she was evasive, although Judge Engoron did take some issue with his testimony, she was a much more credible witness as someone who's sitting in the courtroom, to me, than both of her brothers, for example, were.
The other thing about her, and you touched on this, Vaughn, she is not someone who has gone out, for example, again, we keep talking about Michael Cohen, right, but one of the attacks against him from Trump world and presumably his lawyers in court is going to be, he's made so much money off of Donald Trump, including the women who were involved in this. They've just used this as a money-making machine. We have not seen Hope Hicks necessarily out there day after day, week after week, on cable television, trying to keep her profile up.
She hasn't put on her own podcast. She is somebody who has kind of gone quietly since leaving the Trump administration, and somebody that nobody in Trump world has ever questioned the loyalty to Donald Trump of. In 2016, he had such a small campaign brass. Corey Lewandowski, Hope Hicks, they were the right hands to Donald Trump. Of course, Corey Lewandowski, he got pushed aside, and you would see new campaign managers come in, new chiefs of staff come in. Who was there for most of that time in the White House? It was Hope Hicks. And it gets to the heart of the question, too. She had potential opportunities to go on the airwaves and tell her own story in a tell-all interview. She has never gone publicly to talk about whether Donald Trump knew that $130,000 was intended to go to Stormy Daniels. That's at the heart of the question. Michael Cohen says that Donald Trump knew that's what he was paying him for. Donald Trump says, I know that I was paying Michael Cohen, but he contends that he didn't know exactly what for. Hope Hicks may be that link and may have that answer.
The other thing, Vaughn, is the access, right? When Donald Trump trusts you and you're in that circle, you're there, right? So we don't know how much necessarily she knows, or at least not publicly, we don't know.
No. And to what extent was she engaged in those phone calls between Michael Cohen and Donald Trump on October 8th and October 28th? Was she simply listening in? Because if you were simply listening in on a phone call, that could be good enough testimony. And of course, clearly the prosecution heard from Hope Hicks when she went before the grand jury. So they know that she has something to tell. And there's a reason that they would be calling her back to the stand in front of the actual jury.
I just want to underscore something that Vaughn just said, Chris, about Hope being on the phone calls, irrespective of what she contributed to them. The very fact that she was a third party to those conversations situates her differently from so many other potential witnesses here. In fact, one of the shortcomings of the DA's case here, to the extent that there are some, is that in many respects, it will strike the public as a he said, right? Donald Trump and Michael Cohen were alone having conversations, or in some cases were joined by Alan Weisselberg, who for his own reasons is not likely to be a witness here. To the extent that Hope Hicks can say, no, this conversation happened and I was privy to it, that in and of itself is a very big deal and a score for the Manhattan DA's office.
There's another part of this.